Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. This is actually a re-recording of one of our previous lessons that unfortunately was not recorded live, but we wanted to be sure to get it to you, and it gave me the opportunity to add a few bits and pieces to this otherwise important class. So here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your utility bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation from a job interview to a date to complaining, whatever it may be that you do in your everyday life in your native language, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. Please write us at hebrew@nbn.org.il. That's HEBREW at nbn.org.il. We want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. If you'd like us to come and do a community event wherever you are in Israel, we'd love to hear from you. You can also check out all of our previous lessons on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh, and you will see an entire playlist of all of our previous lessons there and with the vocabulary attached to them. So if you're asking, why haven't we done this topic? Check YouTube first to see if we're there. It's also a great resource for you to review our lessons and just review any topic we've done in the past. If you'd like to join us live on Zoom, please go to our website, go to the Israel calendar at nbn.org.il and find the Cafe Oleh registration link through Zoom. We'd love to have you online so we can answer your questions and just be part of it. The many hundreds who join us weekly and more than 1,000 who've already signed up for our summer session. Let's get into today's class. I think no less important than learning how to read the news or striking up any kind of conversation or even paying bills is how do we articulate how we're feeling in Hebrew, right? We usually rely, just like in English and in other languages, a lot on the equivalent of good, well, fine, not good. I am definitely guilty of that as well. But I want to give you the tools to express yourself a little bit more and a little bit more specifically in Hebrew, as well as to give you a really good resource that I'll show you at the end of this class. So to get started, I'm going to share with you the spreadsheet of vocabulary for this class. As always, you are welcome to screenshot old school pen and paper, the words here, as well as if you are signed up to join us live on Zoom, you will get a weekly email with the recording as well as with the spreadsheet. If you find us on YouTube, you will get a link to download this spreadsheet as a PDF. So when we're talking about feelings in Hebrew, and we'll get to specific feelings in a little bit, but we're often talking about words that come from the same root. Remember, all Hebrew words are comprised of two things: how they're conjugated, how they're formed with vowels and helper letters, and then the root of the word. In Hebrew, shoresh. Typically, those are three letters that when placed in a specific order, they have a general meaning. In this case, all the words you see here at the top in this light blue color all have the same shoresh, the same root of the letters resh, gimel, shin. And they appear in that order, albeit with different vowel sounds and different helper letters in between them to indicate something having to do with feelings. And you're going to see that again and again. These words repeat themselves in having the same shoresh. So if we start from the beginning, right? Excuse me. The word for feeling or feelings, right? In Hebrew, regesh or regesh, depending on how you say the letter resh. Regesh is one feeling, and regashot are feelings. This is a unique case where a word which is masculine does not take the typical masculine ending and instead takes the feminine. But just so you know, the word is regesh or regashot. If instead we want to be a little bit more specific, what kind of feelings we're having, right? We would say rikshot, and then the idea of the feelings. So in this case, feelings of guilt. Sure, we've all had that at some point of time. It's Israel, it's Jews, it's the Middle East, or at least you've heard of someone who's had this, because, you know, God forbid we admit to that. Rikshot ashma is feelings of guilt. Right, we're taking the word feelings, regashot, we're putting it in the construct that we call in Hebrew smichut. It's a fancy term for a compound noun, folks. It's a very common way that we cut down on letters and syllables in Hebrew. Hebrew is all about being as conservative as possible with the amount of syllables and letters we use to express something. So if we can do it in fewer, all the better, right? Same idea as of a compound noun in English, where we take two nouns, putting together to create a new noun. Same here. Rigshot ashma is the same thing as saying regashot shel ashma, right? Instead of that extra word shel, of, we can say the same thing by turning these two nouns into a compound noun. Rigshot ashma, feelings of guilt. We can add that to anything. Rigshot simcha, feelings of happiness. Excuse me. Whatever you want to put in here, this is one way to describe how we're feeling. Let's keep going with the same root of resh gimel shin, because it gives us a lot of everyday words that we use, very practical words. Rigshi. Rigshi is emotional. Rigshi is masculine as an adjective. Feminine would be rigshit, rigshiim, rigshiot for the full conjugation, but it's an adjective. Another adjective we get from this same root is ragish. Ragish is sensitive. And this is an interesting word because ragish is not just emotionally sensitive, it's also physically sensitive. So if you are sensitive to a certain type of food or a plant or animals, this is the word you're going to use. It's sensitive, just like in English, there's a difference between being sensitive and being allergic. Same thing in Hebrew. This is sensitive, rigshi. And the act of being sensitive, aka sensitivity, is regishut. Right? Yesh li regishut lemotzrei chalav. I have sensitivity to dairy products. Good Ashkenazi Jew, right? I have sensitivity to dairy products. Not an allergy, that's allergia. Instead, regishut. Okay? Yesh li regishut lemotzrei chalav. Okay, let's keep going with this root. A great verb. This verb, I promise you're going to hear at least once every day here in Israel. Ani mitragesh, male or female, ani mitrageshet. It means I'm excited, and it also means I'm nervous, but it's nervous in a good way. The great example I give of using this verb is when I made Aliyah almost 17 years ago. I was interviewed by Channel 1 News, what was then Channel 1, which is now Channel 11, because I arrived with Nefesh B'Nefesh on one of the big mega flights in the summer, and someone who I had worked with for a long time at the Jewish Agency recognized me coming from the landing, picked me out of the crowd because he knew I spoke fluent Hebrew and said, I need you to be interviewed for the news to talk about this big event. I'm like, great. So we get there, get to the studio. They put me in, 10 inches of makeup, which is exactly what you want in the middle of August in Israel. Get on the stage, getting ready to be filmed live, and the anchor person turns to me and says, "Ata mitragesh," right? Are you excited, but also are you nervous? And it's nervous in a good way. And so think about when we're excited, right? We're moving around, we're eager, we're anticipating. That's what we're talking about when we say nervous, when this is translated as nervous. Ani mitragesh is nervous in a good way, right? Nervous before a date, nervous before your wedding, God willing, or nervous before a trip, but it's nervous in a good way / excited. If we simply want to say I feel though, it's ani margish. Ani margish, male, ani margisha, female. And then you add after it whatever you would like. And to ask someone, or to be asked, how do you feel? Ech ata margish, you would say to male, ech at margisha, to a female. Okay. Let's move on. We've done a lot with this root. Let's get to some other ways we can express or find other verbs of how to express how we're doing. So row 11 and 12 are the same root here. Lachush and trusha. Lachush means to sense and to feel, but it's to feel in a physical sense, right? So when we say, for example, in Hebrew, ani margish ra, I feel bad, right? The word for bad in Hebrew or evil is ra or ra. When we say I feel bad, it's I emotionally feel bad. But when we say ani chash bera, I physically don't feel well. I physically feel ill. right? Ani chash bera, I feel ill, right? So that's the difference between lehalgish, to feel, and lachush, to feel. Lehalgish is emotional. Lachush is physical. And that's why we get from it the word trusha, row 12 here. Trusha is a feeling, but in the sense of an intuition or an actual sense, right? Like our five senses. חמש התחושות שלנו. Okay? Our five senses. Trusha is a sense or a feeling, meaning intuition. Another verb we might use when we're talking about feelings, and we'll get to even more in a little bit, is ani choshesh, or ani choshesh meh, is I fear something. Ani choshesh me'achom hayom. I fear the heat outside today. Right? It's hot because it's summertime in Israel, right? And finally, when we start naming individual feelings as adjectives or in general, we can always use the verb liot. Liot, to be. Remember, in modern Hebrew, lihiot does not conjugate in the present tense. We simply use the subject pronouns. Ani, I, ata, you masculine, at, you feminine, and so forth, right? In past and future, this verb is conjugated. Hayiti tov, I was well. Eyeh tov, I will be well. But in the present tense, ani tov, I'm good, or I'm well. We'll get to that word in just a second, even though I don't like using it. We're going to talk about it. Okay, there's that word, tov or betov. Tov means both good and well. Hebrew is an amazing language in how mathematical and logical it is. I always compare it to 7th and 8th grade algebra in that respect. It is very logical, certainly more logical than English ever is. And God willing, you should never have to learn English as a second language. And if you have, my hat's off to you, because it is a very complicated language in spelling, in all the exceptions to the rule. And we have a great class here on Cafe Oleh about exceptions to the rule in Hebrew and why they really aren't exceptions. They can all be explained in a very logical sense, with the exception of one thing in Hebrew: adverbs. Adverbs, right, are adjectives that describe verbs, right? He went slowly versus he just went, right? He went versus he went slowly. You get more description, and slowly is an adverb, right? Just like an adjective describes a noun, an adverb describes a verb. In Hebrew, we don't have a standardized way to create adverbs, as evidenced by the word tov. Tov can be both good and well. I will usually answer, if I just want to say I'm doing well, ani betov. The be at the beginning is one of the many ways we convert adjectives into adverbs in modern Hebrew, but it's not standardized. I can't tell you to go and do that for all adjectives. It doesn't work that way. You unfortunately have to learn adverbs one by one, which is the reason why we have some workarounds for it we'll address in another class. Okay, so tov or betov, ani betov is good or well, but let's be a little bit more descriptive or go through some words that mean the same thing, just a little bit more, change it up a bit. So beseder, right? Beseder, beseder, as we say, both as Hebrew slang, but also acknowledging many of our native English accents. Beseder is okay. It literally means in order, but we use this to mean okay. Other words, kacha kacha, meaning so. Lo mashu, not so well. It literally translates to not something or not anything, but it translates in a non-literal sense of I'm not doing so well. Mitsuyan is excellent. Achla and sababa are one of our many slang words that have entered mainstream Hebrew. Hebrew, even though it's a young language in its modern sense, has been used for thousands of years, and its speakers come from many different backgrounds. One of the largest, if not the largest population of Israeli Jews come from Muslim countries where one of the predominant languages was Arabic, and so slang in Hebrew is very much, also because we live in the Middle East, 20% of our population here are native Arabic speakers. A lot of our slang is Arabic in origin. This word simply means, either of these words means awesome, great, really well. Achla or sababa. Okay. Another piece of slang, this is Hebrew, but is turned into slang that's used all the time, is chaval al hazman. Chaval al-Hazman, rows 22 and 23, originally started out as slang meaning, as an idiomatic expression, meaning terrible or bad. Right? If you said that something was Chaval al-Hazman several decades ago, it meant something was legitimately and truly bad. In the last several decades, it's been flipped. Think of the very antiquated bad from the 1980s that went from meaning bad to meaning good. Same thing here. Chaval al-Azman nowadays is more often meaning something is great. And we condense it and turn it into even more slang by abbreviating it to chablaz. So if someone says to you, if you ask someone, איך אתה מרגיש, how do you feel? And they answer chablaz or chaval al-Azman, they're doing well. Now, there's always the issue of tone. Just like in English, sarcasm exists in Hebrew, and it's all about tone, right? So any of these, if you say in a sarcastic tone, just like you would in English, it would be the same in Hebrew. איך אתה מרגיש? How do you feel? Oh, חבל על הזמן, right? If someone says it like that, just like they would do in English, oh, I'm doing wonderful. Clearly they're not, okay? And they're being sarcastic. Same rules apply in modern Hebrew. We have another idiomatic expression slash slang, ala panim. Ala panim literally translates to on the face, but as an idiom and as slang, it means terrible. Legit terrible. This isn't getting flipped around like chaval hazman. It just means terrible. So if someone says, if you ask someone, איך אתה מרגיש? And they say ala panim, they're not doing well. Okay, let's get to some other ways to say well. These class of words are great, and we have even more than I listed here, but these are some of the big ones that you'll hear and some of the more descriptive, colorful, detailed, all around better vocabulary for you. Nehedar. Nehedar, nehederet, nehedarim, nehedarot means great or wonderful. Mehamem. Mehamem, it comes from to stun or to overwhelm, and we usually a lot in modern Hebrew as the equivalent of fabulous, right? Why is that? Pashut mehamem. It's simply fabulous. Exactly as we would say in English, so too in Hebrew. Nifla means great or wonderful, row 28. Mushlam means perfect, and in everyday speech, in slang speech, we abbreviate it to mush, right? Echata, how are you? Another way to ask how you're doing. Echata mush. I'm simply wonderful or perfect. May not be the case, but they're answering like that. These three words are great. I love these three words because they all come up from a specific construct that in fancy English we call the causative. Causative is a verb that causes someone to do something, or someone is the action, the results of someone doing something. In Hebrew, we call that hif'il. You'll learn that as you progress in higher levels of Hebrew. And all these have the same meaning. So the first one is mavrik. Mavrik comes from the root bet resh kuf, which gives us the word barak, lightning. And so if something is mavrik, it's caused to be illuminated. It's caused to something to be illuminated or to be bright or to be sparking. And so mavrik in Hebrew means brilliant. Not just brilliant as in literally brilliant, just like we use in English, right? Brilliant means light-centric brilliance, and also brilliant as in amazing. Same thing in Hebrew. Mavrik, brilliant. Same concept, magniv. Magniv has the root of gimel nun bet, from which we get the word lignov, to steal, ganav, a robber, and magniv is to cause to be robbed, right? Something is caused to be robbed, meaning it's captivating. Magniv is captivating. It can mean great, awesome, wonderful, but it literally means captivating. This thing is so amazing, it caused me to steal it. And finally, we have Maxim. Maxim, many people assume wrongly that it is a cognate from English. It's a cognate from English that it comes from maximum or maximal. It doesn't. Maxim comes from the root kuf samech mem, which uses the same words as kesem, magic, or kosem, a magician. It's also the name of an amazing falafel place here in Tel Aviv. right? Hakosem, the magician, because the falafel is that good. It really is, by the way. Maxim is something that causes magic to happen, enchanting. Maxim literally means enchanting, but we use all these verbs, all these adjectives, excuse me, as meaning great. So instead of using tov all the time, use one of these instead. Really goes a long way. It just changes up your vocabulary, enriches your vocabulary immensely. Just my two shkalim or shnekel, as we call it here. Let's get to some more words and especially verbs. Lismoach. Lismoach is a wonderful verb. It means to become happy. And we use this verb particularly in the past tense and the future tense. For example, esmach. Esmach, row 35, excuse me, means I'd love to, or I'd be happy to. It's a really nice way to not just reply to someone, but it's also a very nice way to reply instead of saying can, yes, excuse me. Instead of someone asking you yes or no, or you want to reply yes, you can simply say esmach, right? Would you like to meet up for coffee today? תרצה להיפגש לקפה היום? Would you like to meet for coffee today? And instead of saying can, or any of the other ways I can say, of course, absolutely, I can say esmach. I'd love to. Okay? Esmach is a great verb. I highly recommend using it on a regular basis. Another verb that comes from the same root of sin mem chet is lesameach. Lesameach is to make someone else happy. You all know this word, sameach. We're already talking about the same root. We might as well bring it out. Sameach means happy. Sameach, smecha, smichim, smechot. And finally, the noun, the act of being happy, aka happiness, simcha. We've talked about this before, and we have a great lesson on modern Hebrew and its derivations, including where we put the stress. What syllable is stressed in modern Hebrew? The default. Give you a short preview of that class, which is available on YouTube. The default is always the last syllable in modern Hebrew. In medieval Hebrew, in Hebrew spoken specifically by Jews from Eastern Europe and elsewhere in Central Europe too, Ashkenazi Hebrew, it's usually on the second to last syllable, which is why in Yiddish and the Hebrew spoken by many people outside of Israel who come from an Ashkenazi background, they will say simcha. Simcha is also a first name for a boy, for a male, but simcha is how you would say the word simcha in Ashkenazi inflected Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, it is only simcha, okay? We are a country full of accents and dialects, not dialects quite yet, but certainly of accents, but standardized modern Hebrew, for the vast majority of words, the stress is on the last syllable, simcha. Okay. Let's get to some other words. We talked about sameach and simcha. Let's do one of the reverses. Lichos. Lichos is to become angry. Okay, lehachis is that causative form we just talked about a little bit ago. Lehachis is to make someone else angry, meaning to anger someone or something. Okay, koes is the adjective. Koes, koeset, kasim, koasim, koasot, angry. And the act of being angry, aka anger, ka'as. Another great verb, we use this one a lot because it's the Middle East and we love our melodrama. Le'achzev, le'achzev, to disappoint, right? Ani ichzavti otcha, I disappointed you. Okay, ichzavti, I disappointed. It's the past tense, first person singular of the verb le'achzev, to disappoint. The flip side of to disappoint is to become disappointed. Lehitachzev. Lehitachzev is also a verb you're going to hear all the time. Hitachzavti becha or hitachzavti mimcha. I was disappointed in you or I was disappointed with you. Okay, either way, you want to say it, use this verb lehitachzev, to become disappointed. Some adjectives that are also participles, and we talk about this a lot in Hebrew, and we've talked about it in previous lesson, that participles are used all the time in Hebrew. A participle can be both a noun, can be both an adjective and a verb at the same time. It can also be a noun, by the way, but not in these necessarily in these cases. Me'uchzav is disappointed. Me'uchzav, me'uchzevet, me'uchzavim, me'uchzavot. Me'achzev is disappointing, right? So if something is disappointing, not just a person, but a place, or disappointing. Ha'ochel haya me'achzev. The food was disappointing. Certainly happens, right? And the act of being disappointed or disappointing, meaning disappointment, achzava. Okay, same root each time, gives us all these different words. Let's get to some others. Le'atzben. Le'atzben, I promise you will, if not hear this word, you will use this word every day in Israel. Le'atzben is to annoy. It can also be to infuriate, but let's just keep it to annoy. It can also, and so yeah, to annoy. Lehitatzben is to become annoyed. This verb, le'atzben, atamatzben oti. You've probably heard that sentence all a regular basis, if not at least, no, I'm going to say on a regular basis. Atamatzben oti. You annoy me. You're teeing me off. I'm trying to be PG-13 with my language here, right? Ata me'atzben oti. I would say to a male, ata me'atzben oti. You are annoying me. Lehitatzben, to become annoyed. Atzbani is the adjective, right? Cranky or nervous. Remember we had earlier in the class, let's skip up here, we had ani mitragesh or ani mitrageshet, and I said that's nervous in a good way, meaning excited. Atzbani is nervous in a bad way. Okay, think about when you're cranky or nervous or annoyed, you're also moving around, you're full of that Yiddish word spilkes. That's what we're talking about here, or atzavim in Hebrew. Atzavim, nerves. From the same root of atzavim, ayin tzadi bet, we get these words we're talking about right now. So atzbani is someone who's cranky or nervous. And nervousness, which we usually attribute as a negative thing, and that's why I only translate it as that, is atzbanut, the act of being cranky or nervous. Okay, some more words. Lehitzta'er. Lehitzta'er means to be sorry. And usually we'll say ani mitzta'er. Well, actually, we won't always say this, right? Unless we're apologizing, we won't say this. And even then, you know, ani mitzta'er for male or ani mitzta'eret for female means I'm sorry. But we can use it in the past tense to mean hitzta'arti. Hitzta'arti lishmoa al. I was sorry to hear about, or I was saddened to hear about, right? It's a way, for example, you can offer condolences or bad news in general, or something didn't go your way. If you conjugate this, conjugate it to the past tense, it's I was saddened. So it's not just to be sorry, to be saddened too. And finally, lehitnatzel, if we're already talking about these verbs, to apologize. Ani mitnatzel, I apologize, right? A few more words, and then I want to show you a really important resource for those of you in Israel. So a few more words, because this isn't just about feelings, it's also about emotional awareness. That's a very important term in general, but especially for fellow Olim, right? Moving here comes with a whole bunch of challenges. Some of them we're already self-aware enough to address, some of them we're not, some we're not prepared for. And as I said at the beginning of the class, to not make your emotional awareness as important as your financial awareness, your street smarts, all those things would be a tragic mistake. So some other words we use when we talk about emotional awareness. Mufnam. Mufnam comes from the root that means inside or internal. For example, the Interior Ministry, where we all get our Teudot Zehut, our national ID cards, and our Darkonim, our passports, is Misrad HaPnim, means the Interior Ministry, the Ministry of the Interior. From the same root, we get Mufnam, internalized. As opposed to Ptichut. the same root that gives us liftoach, to open, ptichut, openness. Also an important word, shakuf. Shakuf means clear. When we talk about like an object, for example, this glass is more or less shakuf, right? As zchuchit kos shkufa. The glass is clear, right? But shakuf, when we're talking about a person, means invisible. Okay. Hu malgish shakuf. He feels invisible. It literally can translate to he feels clear, but because we're attaching to it an emotion, the word for clear becomes invisible. Shakuf, shkufa, shkufim, shkufot. Finally, a few more important expressions to know, or at least terms to know. Hagana atzmit, self-defense. Hagana, you know this word from the name of the Israeli military, is abbreviated to Tzahal, but it stands for Tzva HaHagana LeIsrael, the defense forces of Israel. Tzva or Tzava, Tzva because it's a smichut, it's a compound word, means army or military or forces. Hagana, defense, LeIsrael, of Israel. Okay, and atzmit means self, right? Atzmi means self when we add it at the end of a word like this, and it conjugates depending on the gender of the word it's modifying. So Hagana is defense. Hagana atzmit, because Hagana is feminine, is self-defense. Just like how bitachon is both security but also confidence, bitachon atzmi is self-confidence. Bitachon is masculine, bitachon atzmi, self-confidence. And muda'ut atzmit is self-awareness. Muda'ut is awareness. Atzmit, because it's a feminine word. Muda'ut atzmit, self-awareness. Before we stop here, and I would normally take your questions, I want to show you a really important resource that I talked about at the beginning of class. Let me share that with you here. So several years ago, a really great online resource was opened up called Get Help Israel. It's simply gethelpisrael.com. It is an online directory of all English language therapy in Israel. And you can find all sorts of resources here. Find help, and it gives you all sorts of different options here, common issues, right? Useful resources, and then you can do an actual search, right? And you can search for a therapist, a psychiatrist, a life coach, a treatment facility, speciality, where you live in Israel, right? You can make it clear where you are. But if you press on the advanced, you can go even more in depth, a therapeutic approach, perhaps, what language the therapist speaks, what population they work with, discounts and promotions, therapist, the gender of your therapist, if you prefer to have a male or a female therapist, services offered, type of therapist, and you can see even more than just the ones here, right? If you click on show all, you see even more, everything from educational psychologist to neuropsychologist to life coach and so forth. And a quick search. So if you or someone you know is younger and on a lone soldier program or a gap year program, you can also find someone suitable for them. Equally important in Israel is what insurance, if at all, they take, right? Maybe they only take private insurance. Maybe they take one of the 4 kupot cholim. Remember, in Israel, we have universal health care. Everyone is assigned to one of the 4 kupot cholim. As you see here, they're listed: Klalit, Maccabi, Meuchedet, Leumit. Within your healthcare, you are afforded certain amount of hours of therapy. You can also upgrade your state-sponsored universal healthcare to increase the amount of therapy visits you get, or you can go with private insurance. Maybe you're not looking to pay through insurance at all, but these are all great options. And you can search here and get a wealth of resources in addition to finding a therapist. So as we're talking about feelings and emotions, it's important to also provide you with something practical, not just speaking about them and sharing them with loved ones, friends, family, whoever, but also how to seek support for those feelings and emotions you are having. With that, toda rabah, thank you all for watching, and hope to see you at a live session of Cafe Oleh Mondays at 8 p.m. Israel time. You can also see all of our recorded sessions on YouTube and are usually uploaded in the few days after each class on Monday. Until then, toda rabah and lehitraot. See you all very soon.